Welcome to episode number 7 of Lush Lawn Pro Podcast. I'm Aaron Sampson, CEO of Lush Lawn, and this is
Ken Gesso, COO of Lush Lawn.
Today we're joined by a very special guest. His name is Dan Papineau, and he's a lobbyist, works with 5 Midwest states for the NALP. And well, we go ahead here and get started. Yeah.
Hey, Dan, thanks for joining us. Really excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I was hoping we could just kind of dive in and start out with, you tell us exactly who you work for and what exactly you do.
Yeah, sure. So I guess in this space, I work for the National Association of Landscape Professionals, the nationwide trade association for lawn and landscape businesses. I focus on 5 Midwest states. Those are Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. And I keep track of, policies that affect the industry, and I work to either promote good policies and fight against bad ones. I think a lot of people in the industry, especially you guys, you have equipment, you have buildings, you're paying for property and casualty insurance. I kind of look at myself sometimes as like the your insurance against government. So when it comes to regulations that cost you money or make it harder to do what you do, I work to try to prevent those. And if there's things that we can do to make it easier and, help you become more profitable, we'll work on policies that do that.
Absolutely appreciate that from your end. I know I can speak for the industry on that. I really appreciate what you do for us.
So getting to the roots of this, I'm sure you weren't born a lobbyist. Tell us about your childhood, and I'm sure you weren't born in lawn care, although maybe you were. But if you could just tell us a little bit about your childhood, coming into age, and how it tied to lawn care, how it ties to lobbying.
Sure. So I grew up in St. Clair Shores, so East Side or Macomb County in Michigan, not too far from you guys, I guess. But I grew up in St. Clair Shores, went to Michigan State, studied political science. I did work summers at a golf course and at a baseball complex where we took care of the fields and the course. So it was kind of interesting. A lot of irrigation, a lot of weed control and fertilization. Really kind of shows you how turf is really a safe playing field. A lot of people go towards these artificial fields, but
you really did get started young there. With that. How old were you when you were first exposed to lawns and lawn care?
Sure. So it was a job I did in high school, and then carried it through college.
Okay.
And then I did study political science, and I didn't really know what to do with it towards the end of my college experience. So I bought a book, and it was called "What to Do with a Political Science Degree." So
okay,
yeah, half go to law school, half work for nonprofit organizations. So I did try to go to law school, but it didn't. I ended up going to law school and also working on a campaign. And gentleman was running for state senate. He ended up winning. So I came to Lansing with him and got to work in the state senate. So I really learned how a bill becomes a law from the inside out, and saw how policies create it and adopt it. And then, term limits are really short, so you can only work for a legislator for a short period of time before you have to look for a new one, and that can be kind of hard. So the other option that's a little more steady is lobbying. Take those skills that you learned on the inside and use them on the outside. So that's how I got started in the lobbying field.
Yeah, so that must have been really exciting, winning your first campaign. Do you have any stories to tell with regards to that?
Oh man, it's brutal. Campaign work is tough. It's like door-to-door sales. Only you're selling a person, and people.
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to get at that door, and it could be 100 degrees out, and you're walking door after door, talking to people that probably really don't want to talk to you. But it's rewarding though when you do come out with your candidate wins, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know this about me, but in 2000 I actually ran for state office myself, and so I did a lot of door-to-door work as well. and I just kept knocking and knocking. I think I had calluses on my knuckles, and you get to hear a lot of interesting things as you go through and knock on all the doors. But yeah, it's quite an experience. Unlike you, I lost, so I'm jealous of you right now for winning like that. But that must have been a wonderful experience. So how did that tie into your first lobbying job? How did that bring you to your first job?
So, like I said, the term limits are short. So, like, my boss could only be a state senator for 8 years. We got through the first 4. He ran for re-election and won. And on the 5th year, it was like, okay, I got a family, I got bills to pay. Like, I got to look for something a little more permanent. I got to keep kind of going in a trajectory upwards. If you stay in the legislature, it's hard to find different bosses, and it's really a roller coaster. It's not ideal. So I was approached by a organization that's now called the Midwest Independent Retailers Association. It's made up of small business owners that are primarily focused on like convenience stores, gas stations, liquor stores, so highly regulated. Tobacco, alcohol sales, those are very regulated products, gasoline, and even food, really, with, SNAP benefits and some of those social programs. So I worked, they asked me to come work for them. They were based in West Bloomfield, and I did that for a year, and it was a great experience. These guys a lot of them actually were first generation or second generation Americans, and very hard-working entrepreneurs. So my respect for the small business owner and entrepreneurialism really started to build there. And I tell you, these people, they could be from, India or Lebanon, but they were the most patriotic people I've ever met. Their loyalty to America was so strong because this country gave them the opportunity to do what they could never do back at home. So that was a great experience. And, working on their behalf was a lot of fun. Learned a lot about a highly regulated industry, and worked for some really good entrepreneurs. And they were very patient but very aggressive at the same time, because they work hard, so they want the people that work for them to work hard. And it was a good first step into lobbying.
Yeah, so it's very inspiring, isn't it, when you see somebody come over from another country here and have a lot of success and work really hard to gain that success and become a business person and a successful entrepreneur. What would you say are some of the biggest regulatory threats or opportunities in lawn care companies right now?
Yeah. So we're seeing it all over the place. I've had a 50 state purview on laws and regulations that impact the lawn and landscape industry for 5, almost 6 years now. And the biggest threat is preemption. So a lot of people don't know, but in state law there is a law in almost every state that disallows local governments from regulating pesticides and sometimes even fertilizer. And that's important because you really want to keep pesticide regulations at the state level where experts base regulation on facts and science. When local governments can start passing regulations on pesticides, they tend to be more focused on emotions and feelings, and that's not how businesses should be regulated. So pesticide preemption is super important. We must maintain that law in the 46 states that have that, and there's a lot of states that are looking to repeal it. And a lot of people will say, well, local control is the best, but in this case, and I would agree with that 90% of the time, but in this case, it's not. We really need to keep pesticide preemption laws on the books and keep the products that we use every day to service your customers regulated at the state level with the experts at the departments that regulate you.
I'm sorry, you mentioned 46 states that have that. Could you speak to some of them that don't, and kind of what the impact has been for those states that don't have preemption?
Yep. So like Maine's a good example. Maine does not have preemption, and they will just ban a city, a city of 10, 20, 30,000 people. They will ban synthetic pesticides. So your customers have an expectation when you do business with them that their landscape is going to be healthy and look beautiful. And if you can't use, EPA approved products that help do that, it's a big problem. So, a lot of times you end up not meeting customer expectation, and those people just kind of go from lawn care company to lawn care company, hoping that someone can do something better. But, there's only so much you can do with with non-synthetic pesticides, and a lot of them just don't. There's not as effective and don't work as well. So you'll see like the city of Portland, like that's 60,000 customers that just came off that you no longer can market potentially. And so, that's the impact.
So that's Portland, Maine, and so in Portland, Maine, what are some of the things that companies have done to adapt to the regulations put forth in Portland?
Yeah, I mean they'll use they're trying to use organic fertilizers like biosolids, but now we're seeing that there's PFAS in those products, so those are getting banned. They'll do temporary solutions, like they'll burn a weed. And then, unfortunately, as you guys know, I mean, that'll come back within a couple days. So it's just really difficult to meet customer expectations in those states or in those localities that have those kinds of bans.
Okay. And you mentioned PFAS. I don't think many of our listeners are aware of what PFAS is. Could you explain what that is?
It's a type of chemistry that is widely used in just about everything. I mean, it's used in waterproof clothing. It's used to coat pans like a Teflon product. It's in everything. I mean, that's the problem, is we're finding it everywhere. And as states try to ban PFAS, it's very difficult because it is so prevalent. So it is used in a lot of pesticides, a lot of fertilizers. PFAS is, and it's a forever chemical. Doesn't break down. So, if a cow eats feed that might have PFAS in it, and then they poop it out, and it goes in the land, and then corn is growing, and then that PFAS gets in the corn, and the cow eats the corn feed. Like, it's a cycle, so it's just running rampant. There is no definitive science on it, but it's looking like we'll probably see it being a contributing factor to cancer.
Okay, yeah. I see. That's interesting.
Hey, Dan, you also mentioned EPA there. Could you let us know how that impacts pesticide regulations, labeling, and laws, how the EPA does that?
So the EPA is the federal regulator for pesticides. It's a pretty extensive process in how they go about approving a pesticide and labeling it. It's about an 11-year process, actually. And it's very, very rigorous. And then the EPA also, they allow the states to regulate pesticides too, so they're kind of the overarching regulatory body, but then states can also regulate those products and register them, and they have some regulatory authority and enforcement authority over their use. So EPA is they're very focused on the science. They shouldn't be and they don't regulate on emotions or hollow scare tactics or half truths. And I think industry has a pretty good relationship with EPA. I think they're set out to make sure that we're not damaging the environment, and I don't think anybody that uses pesticide products wants to do that. You want to service your customers, and you're promoting a healthy environment. You're not trying to destroy it. So it's pretty collaborative.
Yeah, so I think I should say in full disclosure that we're both part of NALP Government Affairs Committee. And one of the things I did want to mention with regards to the EPA is historically the EPA hasn't really been dialed into our industry, I think, with testing and getting a good understanding of exactly how much product we put down and how we use it and things like that. What are some of the things that have improved over the last 4 or 5 years with informing the EPA as to exactly how we use our products?
Yeah, great point too, Aaron. I think EPA has always been focused on agriculture, really, to be honest, and not so much like lawn care and landscape. And that has proven to be a problem, because now there's new regulations that are coming down the pike that are going to cause a pretty big change for the lawn and landscape industry. So it's been more important than ever for the lawn and landscape industry to get to know and work well with the EPA. So like you said, about for the past 4 or 5 years, there's been a concerted effort to work with them and get them to understand how lawn and landscape uses pesticide products versus agriculture. We're using them very sparsely, very fine-tuned, very accurate. It's very different than broadcasting it with a boom spreader or something, or from an airplane even.
Yeah.
And we've tried to build personal relationships with EPA regulators, as well as bringing them out for an annual field day. Like we just had that right in the fall. We brought, I think, probably 20, 25 EPA regulators to it was actually a True Green branch. We showed them the technology and how our sprayers, you're only spraying a couple feet from the ground. We talked about how we apply and the PPE that we use. So we did all that stuff in the branch, how we mix, and really the amount of pesticide that we put down is very minimal, and try to explain to them like these tanks might look scary, in your warehouse, but it's really mostly water. So we try to show them, real life, what a branch looks like and how we store our products and all that. And then we take them to a park and we actually do demonstrations. So we show them what a ride-on spreader looks like. And, we show them how the technology advances, where when you're on a rider and you're turning, the technology is advanced where it slows down on the inner part of the turn versus the outer part. It's become so accurate, and that's only getting sprayed inches from the ground. So when we think about concerns like drift and that, it's really non-existent for us. Now for ag, it would be, a little bit different. So we've made a really big, there's been a big push to get EPA regulators familiar with our industry and make them recognize that how we use these products are very different than how many others might use them.
Yeah, I found it very interesting in our meetings that they talked about how the EPA assumed that we were doing grub treatments on all of our customers, for example. So if we have, like, say, 500 or 1,000 customers, or in our case we have 15,000 customers, that we would put down grub on every single customer, that we blanket all of our apps with weed control, and we wouldn't be spot spraying and things like that. So I think that relationship, with the EPA and showing them exactly what we do, I think it's been very beneficial, Dan, and thanks for demonstrating that. I did want to move on to another topic, and it's this really impacts more the southwest part of the country, and I know you're working with 5 states in the Midwest. But there's also some states in the Northeast, like Massachusetts, that have some issues with things like watering restrictions. And I was just going to ask you, how are watering restrictions impacting lawn care?
Yeah, I mean, in a pretty big way, and I think it's only going to get more impactful. But yeah, we've seen, in states like Nevada and, on the Southwest, like you said, they have water shortages. I mean, we just saw one actually in Iowa. Their water treatment plant couldn't keep up with the demand, and they disallowed everybody from watering their lawn. And, for lawn care, I mean, if you have these customers, they have an expectation that their grass is going to be green and weed free. And if you can't water it, then, that's, I think, no amount of product's going to help. And even some products need to be watered in. So, I remember when I worked directly for a lawn care company, when someone like Iowa, a state like Iowa says, well, you can't water your grass anymore, a lot of customers would call and say, hey, can I skip this? I need to skip this application because I can't water it in. Or can I skip this application because, my grass is brown and it's not your work isn't going to do anything. They know, what we do and why it's important, and how watering is also important. So it could be really impactful on the industry.
Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of lawn care operators don't realize the impact of these regulations until it really is out there, and until it's too late sometimes. So another regulation that's been pretty big, especially on the West Coast, but also in municipalities, I believe in Houston, and there's been other municipalities, I believe in New Jersey, for example. I'm talking about equipment bans. So in particular, leaf blowers, moving from gas power to electric like California, but also the local initiatives where they're banning leaf blowers. What is the status of some of these initiatives?
So I really focus on state level policy because it's so hard to do the local stuff. There's no centralized system that will tell you that an ordinance is up, and they're really hard to fight. But they're popping up everywhere, and they really become, mostly it's leaf blower bans. There's just a big push to force people into electric equipment when no one's really ready. The manufacturers aren't ready. The lawn care businesses aren't ready. But there's an environmental there's a feeling that we need to do this for the environment. We need to do it now by many folks that prioritize that. and it makes it really hard. I mean, the equipment that you need to use to service customers, you use what you use because it works. And if there was other options, you'd explore them. But it's created a really bad situation. It's really putting the cart before the horse. I think if we wanted to go to electrification, states should look at, and locals should look at more of a carrot versus a stick approach. If you want a lawn care company to buy electric equipment, well, help them cover the cost because that equipment's expensive, as opposed to like banning the use of a gas leaf blower, or fining a business that gets caught using it. So we really need to focus on kind of the carrot approach versus the stick approach. And no state, I think, other than California has banned the equipment. So when it comes to the state level, we're doing okay. But these locals, they ban it and they really use it. They really do it through noise because they're not allowed to ban something based on emissions. That's not within their purview. So they do it for noise. And really, the electric ones are just as loud sometimes. So it's a tough one.
That's a great point on the electric blowers. I heard a stat that they're up to 85%. The decibels are about 85% as much as a gas-powered one. And I think if you had them side by side, I don't know that you'd really tell the difference on those ones that are even that much quieter. So it's a great point you bring up there on the noise part of it.
On the carrot part, what could state and even the federal government do to offset some of that cost of converting from a gas-powered equipment to electric equipment, from gas-powered leaf blowers to electric leaf blowers?
Yeah. It would probably be like a tax credit or something. You could a state could say like, look at you can deduct like half of what you spent on electric equipment if you bought that kind of equipment. So you'd see maybe some savings on your tax bill at the end of the year. It's easier to do that than like send checks. So I could see them doing something like that, and then also give people like a lead time too. Like if you want to incentivize it, do it through the tax code. But also if you want people to transition, give them several years to do it. Don't just say, okay, it's March 13th and come April 13th, you need to have all electric equipment. Like that's just nonsensical and punitive.
Okay. What mistakes do lawn care operators make politically or with public opinion?
Well, that's so the biggest mistake is that they don't get to know their elected officials. I think that's really important. Those that are like weighing in on policy that affect you, you need to get to know them. So when they're looking at, if it's a local city council member thinking about banning gas-powered equipment, or if it's a state policymaker looking at banning, synthetic pesticides or something, like they need to think, oh man, this is going to affect this business in my district. I should call them and see what they think. I think that's really important, and I think a common mistake of really all business owners, but especially lawn care, because they're so regulated and so unique, and there's so many inaccuracies out there about lawn care. So that's a big mistake. I think the second would be to make sure you're sensitive to neighbors. So you might have a customer that you service, but don't think that neighbor across the street isn't a total like anti-pesticide activist watching everything you do. Because if they target you and you make one mistake, then the whole industry gets put in that basket as making the same kind of mistake. So just be really conscious that and make sure your people know that they're being watched, and just make sure that they're doing the right thing. They're well trained. They have all the equipment they need to do the right thing. I'd say maybe those are two of the biggest things I'd point out.
Yeah. Hey, Dan, I want to go kind of in line with that too, but I want to start off by saying, you were NALP's Advocate of the Year for 2025, so I want to congratulate you on that. It's a great honor. So great work. And in that, I've seen your acceptance speech on that. I want to read a quote that I heard from that. So I'm going to read it so I don't mess it up here. But it says, "When decisions are based on emotions or the loud voices of a vocal minority, it's a majority who often face the negative consequences." Thought that was pretty powerful. And it made me think, what can lawn care operators do to make their voices heard and get politicians to listen?
Yeah. I would say, so every politician has like coffee hours. They post them on their website. Go visit them at their coffee hours. Or just call them and set up a meeting and introduce yourself. look at policy. Legislators aren't scary people, and they know that they don't know what they don't know. So a politician's worst nightmare is being embarrassed. And they get embarrassed when they start talking about things they don't know about. So
Does that ever happen, Dan, where they talk about things they don't?
yeah, right, all the time. Yeah, all the time. But they're going to be curious. They're going to want to hear about your business, how many people you employ in their district, what you do, the products you use, why they're important. You really got to educate your policymakers, because if 15 people at a city council meeting are allowed to run the narrative, it's going to be the hundreds of businesses that are going to get the short end of the stick.
Yeah. Got to get out there and do our part, right? Help educate and help get the word out there. So appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's tough because you guys are running a business. You're paying people. You're servicing customers. So it is really hard. And unfortunately, the activist community is always going to have a lot more time on their hands than the business community. It's just how it is.
Okay. Can you describe the Green Space Coalition and how it helps our industry?
Yeah, the Green Space Coalition is really focused on kind of that water use question. It's a coalition of industry partners that come together and talk about how to mitigate watering bans and things like that. We got academics, we got businesses, a lot of people that come together to look at the issue. And we want to be responsible of the environment and our water use. So if there's water smart irrigation technology that a coalition partner can bring forward that we need to maybe adopt as an industry standard, great. If there's an academic that can chime in and talk about how water use can be better done based on the science and facts and research that they're aware of, great. So it's a coalition that come together to try to help solve a problem. We know that there's water shortages, but we also know that we need to water our landscapes so that they continue to produce oxygen, sequester carbon, and promote all the other environmental benefits that healthy lawns and landscapes promote.
Yeah, so when I look at their website, the Green Space Coalition, I encourage our listeners to look at it as well. Just Google Green Space Coalition. And on the website, there's a lot of really cool things on there that really help our industry. And I love the science on there. I love how it talks about the reduction in noise pollution, the well-kept lawns even reduce crime, and there's studies on that support that. So I thought it's very interesting, very helpful for us. And I think a lot of people in our industry should consider putting links to their website, to this particular website, to show the studies. I don't know if you agree with that, Dan, but I really enjoy their website.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good idea, and I think I think the industry needs to promote itself more. Exactly to that point, Aaron. We really need to talk about how the services we're providing have an environmental benefit. We are the original green industry. We are the original environmental, caretakers. So we should be proud of that, and we should talk about it more.
Yeah, we certainly are the environmental caretakers, and we want our tools to be able to do that too. And so that's why we advocate to be able to use the tools that we have to take care of people's lawns. But in that vein, so it really kind of connects to what the last question was about, and that's with artificial turf, right? So artificial turf, again, we're talking more about the Southwest, but even in Florida, and then our neighbors to the north in Canada and Ontario, there's a lot of artificial turf. But how is natural turf better than artificial turf?
Oh, it's the environmental benefits of natural turf far outweigh artificial turf. I mean, your real grass is a real plant, and it covers a lot of space. And cumulatively, it has a big impact on the environment. And we've talked a little bit about those benefits. You're right, Aaron. There is science that show that it reduces crime, it increases your home value. We talked about sequestering carbon, preventing runoff. It literally cools the environment. When we're talking about climate change, you have a natural product that will give you all the other benefits of creating oxygen and sequestering carbon, as well as cooling the environment and having a reverse effect on kind of warming temperatures, especially in urban areas. So artificial turf, I don't know if there is an environmental benefit to it at all. It's tremendously more hot. It's tremendously hotter. It doesn't filter rainwater. It doesn't prevent runoff. It doesn't. I don't know what it does actually. And also there's a lot of concern over the material that artificial turf is made out of. A lot of those pellets will be recycled tires, and you don't know really what chemicals are in those.
Yeah. Talk about PFAS, right? Isn't
Yeah.
that what's in artificial turf? I think it's all
Yes,
PFAS.
many times.
Yeah, it's probably PFAS magnified times a million, I would think, in artificial turf.
Hey, Dan, I was hoping you could tell us the difference between the regulatory environment of lawn care in the United States versus other countries.
That's a tough one. I really have spent so many years focused on the U.S. I know it's dramatically different. And, even the structure of government is very different. Like, even when we look to the north in Canada, like I've done some issues in a couple of provinces. It's very different how they set the regulations and how each province is so autonomous. So, you could ask, like, how it's different between USA and Canada when it comes to our industry. But it's almost like you have to ask, how is it different between USA and Ontario and Quebec and everyone else and any other ones. So, and also in Europe, it's very different. I mean, there's a lot higher threshold, I think, on some things it's tough to say. I wish I had a better answer for you, but
No, that's fair.
Okay. What I want to say before we leave you here, Dan, is I want to lighten this up a little bit. And could you just tell us something fun or funny that's happened in your lobbying experience over the years? Can you give us a story on something along those lines?
Yeah, I tell you, there is a lot of passionate people out there about a lot of issues. And when I go in and I advocate on behalf of lawn care and landscape businesses, there's often a lot of pushback from, I would say, like the environmental community. And one time I was in a state, I was at the state capitol, and there was a bill that would ban a certain product, certain chemistry, really just based, again, not based on science, but just ban it because they feel like they should. And there was a bunch of activists there, and one of them was dressed like a bumblebee. And he just continued to, like, circle me and make a buzzing noise and prevent me from, like, talking to anybody and, like, sitting down. Like, it was really weird. And this is like a grown ass man. Like I get it that you don't like maybe our industry or what we do. But look, we can talk all day about, like, about data and about facts, and you could have your difference of opinion, but you're really not doing anything when you're just walking around me making noise. Like, it was very very weird.
Well, at least he didn't sting you.
Yeah, right.
So.
Probably tried.
Or did he? I don't know.
Really weird.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, so I'd say in closing, for sure, we talked about the NALP a little bit earlier. That's National Association of Landscape Professionals, and I would encourage our listeners to consider joining that organization. It's a great lobbying organization for the industry, and it really helps us, inform us about what's going on with regulations and government affairs. And also it gives us a voice too for all the good things that we're doing for our customers, for our businesses, for our communities, and of course for the environment as well. All the wonderful things that lawns do that NLP speaks to. So I did also want to thank you, Dan. This is a really good podcast. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure our listeners will as well. What do we do to follow you on social media? How do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to the NALP website and find contact information as well. And my email is pretty simple. It's just my last name with the number 1 at gmail.com.
Okay. Excellent. So, Lush Lawn, you can also look at us on Instagram. You can look at us on Twitter, on Facebook, and also LinkedIn too. Especially on Instagram, we're really trying to boost our followers on there. We're putting some cool stories on there. There's a lot of interaction with Instagram and our customers, our followers, etc. So, anyways, it's been wonderful doing our number 7. Is this 7?
Seven,
So Lucky 7. Yeah, it's our Lucky 7 podcast. And thanks again, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Been great having you.
Thank you.